Welcome to this week's edition of Flashback Friday, which also happens to be a 10th episode. Those of you who subscribe regularly to the podcast know that every 10th episode, Jason goes off topic and brings you something outside of the real estate space that actually affects the real estate space in the long run. Of course, Flashback Friday is your opportunity to get some good review by listening to episodes from the past that Jason has handpicked to help you today in the present and propel you into the future. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Holistic Survival Show with Jason Hartman. The economic storm brewing around the world is set to spill into all aspects of our lives. Are you prepared? Where are you going to turn for the critical life skills necessary to survive and prosper? The Holistic Survival Show is your family's insurance for a better life. Jason will teach you to think independently, to understand threats, and how to create the ultimate action plan. Sudden change or worst case scenario, you'll be ready. Welcome to Holistic Survival, your key resource for protecting the people, places, and profits you care about in uncertain times. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Jason Hartman.
Welcome to today's show. This is Jason Hartman, your host, and as you may or may not know, every 10th show we kind of do a special tradition here that originated with my Creating Wealth show, where we do a topic that is actually off topic on purpose, something just to do with general life and more successful living, and that's exactly what we're going to do today with our special guest. Again, 10th show is off topic, and it is very much intentional, just for personal enrichment, and I hope you enjoy today's show. And we will be back with our guest in just a moment. It's my pleasure to welcome Gregg Murset to the show. He is the founder and CEO of MyJobChart.com. This is a real innovative product, or service I should say, to help teach work ethic at a young age and leadership skills. Gregg, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Well, good. It's good to talk to you, and you're coming to us today from beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona, right near me. Yeah, fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. And first of all, is it lacking? And why is it important? What do you mean by it, if you could define it? And then let's talk about how to develop it.
You know, I think leadership in and of itself is lacking. I think you can look at it on lots of different levels. I think leadership's lacking sometimes in the country with our elected leaders. I think there's leadership lacking in the home. There's just across the board, it seems like nobody really wants to take charge and everybody wants to be along for the ride. And so leadership is one of those things that needs to be developed and it needs to be focused on. And it's a really super important characteristic, especially in kids, that needs to be nurtured as they grow.
You know, I wrote an article several years ago about the concept, Gregg, of being a host rather than a guest in life. You know, so many people, they act like they're a guest. You know, they want to be entertained, they want to have stuff done for them, but very few people act like a host. And I think that would be sort of analogous to, you know, what you said about leadership. People want to be along for the ride.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? People just want to sit there and flip through Facebook and be entertained and watch funny things, and it's almost like people want to just live a movie star lifestyle without doing anything, and it's really a problem. I mean, there's such a lack of not only leadership but work ethic, right? I mean, the day of just busting it out and working hard seems to be something that is just lacking, and people don't want to, you know, go for it anymore. And so they want to, you know, be entertained, watch Facebook, and be, you know, with YouTube and all these different things, entertained 24/7 and not really put any effort into it. Well, and it's a big problem. It's crippling us.
Yeah, I agree. But in one respect, you can't really blame people for being that way, because it's just permeated our culture, the media and the entertainment culture. It's really ridiculous. You mentioned Facebook, so you know, some people post memes, of course, on Facebook, and you see them in your news feed. And one that I was looking at recently it had a black and white picture of, how kids used to entertain themselves, and it had kids playing jacks, the old game jacks, and playing baseball with a stick that they found, not even a bat, and things like this. Versus today, you got a bunch of kids sitting around looking at their cell phone screens.
You're absolutely
it's crazy.
Right. The average kid, by the time they're age 18, will have spent 20,000 hours in front of a video game. I mean, that is a big problem, Houston. I mean, that is a problem. I don't care how much thumb coordination is a skill these days, but that just in and of itself is telling that we need to change this. I mean, we've got to kind of go back to the old school a little bit and teach kids that they can't just sit around and do nothing. That's a big problem.
Yeah, well, I guess, Greg, what they're going to do is, if you want to instill these ideas, they're going to, constantly ask themselves, what's in it for them? Why make the effort? Why bother? Why knock yourself out, as the old phrase goes? What is in it for them? I mean, is it all long distance, or, everybody's looking for instant gratification nowadays? Is there anything that we can show people that they get right away?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to a parent. I mean, I think a parent needs to be able to teach their child delayed gratification. And it's not that everything in your whole life has to be delayed, right? There's nothing wrong with working real hard and getting something fast. There's nothing the matter with that. But delayed gratification is one of those virtues that you really have to work on. And kids struggle with it these days because they have everything kind of at their fingertips, literally. And so you just have to try to teach them in a way that's meaningful to them why it is good to delay that. And it's tough, and parents are struggling with that. But I think, and that's why we really have kind of created my job chart, is because it teaches, all right, you got to set a goal, and you got to work towards that goal. And it might take a little time, but if you do that, and you reach the goal, that builds you. That builds you as a person, that builds your character.
Well, I love what Zig Ziglar said about that, the late, great Zig Ziglar. He said, it's not what we get by achieving our goals that counts, it's who we become by trying. And that's exactly true, So the ability to delay gratification in a culture that has instant gratification everywhere we look, it's pretty tough to sell that.
It is, and it's, at the end of the day, it's a little boring, and it's a little bit, it's not the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's an important characteristic that you have to instill, and it's tough for even adults to do that sometimes, right? We all want stuff, and we want it now. You look at the days of paying off a mortgage, right? People don't even think about that hardly anymore. You're 65 and 70 years old, and you still have a mortgage, because you don't want to kind of stay at it and keep putting away money towards your mortgage to pay it off. I mean,
well, why do that when you can use your house as an ATM machine, take money out, get a tax incentive to do so, go on vacations, buy expensive gadgets and goodies, and then, when the market goes down the tubes again, just default on your mortgage and let the bank take the hit. And it's really not the bank, because it's really just the government through the next TARP bailout.
Right? Isn't that great?
It's just an absurd world in which we live. I mean, you can see why people don't have good traditional work ethic, good traditional values, because they're not rewarded for it anymore, Greg. I mean, it's sad. However, I do want to make a point, just since you brought it up, on paying off the mortgage. From an investor perspective, as long as it's not from a consumeristic perspective, I think paying off your mortgage is a very bad deal. But that's sort of an investment philosophy, and I get what you're saying about saving, developing capital formation, working for a distant goal. I get the concept.
Absolutely, there's two sides to that coin, but you're right on. This whole 2008, 2009 bloodbath that we went through in the economy was, at the end of the day, irresponsibility. It was irresponsible on the banks, on the government, on people making decisions. all of that kind of boiled up to, you know what? It's just a bunch of irresponsibility, and that's
and I think you're being extremely generous there. I would call it a bunch of criminality.
Well, I think I'd agree with you. It just is. It was out of control, and I don't know that it's totally in control now.
It's definitely not. I mean, Wall Street is the modern version of organized crime. The banksters, they're just, it's just unbelievable. You can be a crook nowadays if you're big enough because you have a lobbyist, a PR firm, and a huge law firm working for you to help you be a crook. It's unbelievable, but that's another subject.
That just reinforces the fact that we need to kind of go back to the basics here and get leadership to make decisions that are good for people and kind of go back to these fundamentals of work ethic and smart money decisions.
Yeah, no question. Well, what do you think the cause of money problems is for most people nowadays? If you look at someone who's in their 20s, for example, you can probably bet that they're struggling. The employment market's pretty tough. Obamunism isn't working very well, in my opinion. We're in this sort of fake recovery, as I've long said. But even when these people, in their 20s, they get a job and they've got a decent job, they're still broke, I mean, of course, they're saddled with ridiculous amounts of student loan debt. That's a whole nother scam that we don't need to talk about.
That's a whole nother thing. I think at the end of the day, I think the reason why so many people are struggling is because they see on TV, they see on Instagram, they see on Facebook, all these people living this fancy lifestyle, and they all want to live this kind of Justin Bieber lifestyle, and they don't have the money to do it, but they're trying to do it. They have to have, even though they have, the average $45,000 in student loans, they have $45,000 in student loans, but they have a BMW. It's just bad decision making, and it's trying to live beyond your means. I mean, I feel like I'm a grandpa talking here, but the bottom line is it's living beyond your means. It's spending more than you make. And that's a big problem.
And what it boils down to, too, Greg, is the concept of spending money on the appearances of wealth rather than things that create actual wealth. So people will sell their dreams for small desires. They want to be wealthy. They want to do all this stuff. But each little decision to be more consumeristic, to go out and lease that BMW they can't afford, to buy all the fancy new clothes, really puts off their ability to create capital to do things like buy a rental property and grow a real investment portfolio. They're faking it. They're spending money on the appearances of wealth.
And it's not a fake it till you make it. It's almost fake it, but you might not make it because you're faking it. And I think back to my grandfather, right? He owned several apartment complexes. He did very well in real estate. He was the millionaire next door, right?
To Thomas Stanley's. And by the way, just explain what you're talking about. Thomas Stanley's book, The Millionaire Next Door, talked about how the average millionaire drives a 5-year-old car. Okay, they don't have or an 8-year-old car. I can't remember, but they don't have all the new stuff.
An 8-year-old F-150 Ford pickup.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean a modest. That's the most popular pickup in the world, the F-150, and it's a modest vehicle, and it's old. It's not new, and they're not wasting their money on silly stuff. They're spending their money on the things that actually create wealth, as Stephen Covey calls it, production capacity. Things that can do something for them.
That's exactly right, and I think back to him, and I think he was the typical, he had this Hawaiian shirt and he drove around this minivan, right? But he had millions and millions of dollars. So that's the thing. And kids, adolescents, 20s, 30s, everybody nowadays is trying to fake it, and they're leasing everything, and they're overextended on everything, and it's really inhibiting them from actually achieving real wealth and real security.
Well, Madison Avenue has done a great job of selling Americans things they don't need and getting them to debt they can't afford, haven't they?
Absolutely. It's crazy.
It really is. What else do you want to touch on before you go? You want to talk a little bit more about the leadership side of the equation?
Yeah, I think in this, maybe this is just something that I think is just a problem in America as well, is that it seems like some time ago everybody had to be a winner, and I don't quite understand that. I mean, one of my kids ran in a track race last fall, and he was not first place, but he got a first place medal. And it was kind of confusing to him, like, hey, I got a medal. And I was like, oh yeah, you did. And it's just like, why do we do that?
Because that's the participation prize. You know, you're in first place, you're a winner just because you showed up, which I guess should get some reward. You know, I think it was Woody Allen with the old saying, 80% of success is just showing up, and there is something to be said for that. But come
Absolutely,
on, I mean, you know, we need to get back to a meritocracy, don't we?
Yeah, we can't praise failure. I mean, and it's not that we have to say, boy, you were the worst runner out there. I mean, of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I mean, you think back, and, you know, Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Bill Gates' first company was a big old flop. And then Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. I mean, that stuff happens, and that's okay. And that's how you create a leader. That's how you become a leader, is you're running on the track, you fall down, you might not get first place, but you dust yourself off and you go again. So that's real leadership, and you're right, we need to get back to that stuff.
We sure do. Any tips for doing that?
I think it all goes back to getting back to the basics. I think it's good decision making. I think it's being fiscally responsible. I think it's never giving up. I think it's striving to lead out. And if you're in a class in college, if you're in your first job, if you're in whatever predicament you're in, take a leadership role. Try to drive something. Get your passion behind it, and don't give up.
Now, Gregg, you founded a company, myjobchart.com, that specializes in teaching these skills, these old-fashioned values, if you will, to kids, right?
That's right. I mean, I started that because I recognized I wanted those kinds of values instilled in my kids. And now we have over 600,000 members. And we have a new member joining every 2 minutes. So these are things that are resonating with people because they recognize what we've been talking about. They recognize the train wreck that's essentially our society in many respects, and the fact that we need to get this back on track. And so it hasn't been an easy thing to start this and kind of lead this revolution in this thought process. But, you know, just like we've just talked about, you can't give up, and you keep pushing, and things happen. Next thing you know, there's 600,000 people following, and it's a great thing.
Give us just one example of how this works, you know, just a quick little elevator speech.
Sure. So my job chart is a free online chore chart for kids ages 5 to 15. And parents assign chores to their kids. They earn points for doing the chores, and those points represent money. And then they can use that money to save in real savings accounts, share with charities, or spend on things they need or want.
Fantastic. And 600,000 members now, huh?
Isn't that crazy?
That's great.
We're on our way to 1 million people and beyond, and it's because parents are waking up and don't want their kids to be laying on the couch and just wasting their life away. They want to empower them, and they want them to become better.
I wish we had this the last generation. It would have been a great tool. Well, where can they find that? It's myjobchart.com, right?
I got it. Yep.
All right, Gregg. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and leadership and good old-fashioned values. It's great to hear about this stuff. Save, invest, that good old richest man in Babylon philosophy, I think, is a very good one, and that's essentially what we're talking about today.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
What's great about the shows you'll find on jasonhartman.com is that if you want to learn about some cool new investor software, There's a show for that. If you want to learn why Rome fell, Hitler rose, and Enron failed, there's a show for that. If you want to know about property evaluation technology on the iPhone, there's a show for that. And if you'd like to know how to make millions with mobile homes, there's even a show for that. Yep, there's a show for just about anything, only from jasonhartman.com, or type in Jason Hartman in the iTunes Store.
Thank you for joining us today for the Holistic Survival Show, protecting the people, places, and profits you care about in uncertain times. Be sure to listen to our Creating Wealth show, which focuses on exploiting the financial and wealth creation opportunities in today's economy. Learn more at www.jasonhartman.com or search Jason Hartman on iTunes. This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company, offering very general guidelines and information. Opinions of guests are their own, and none of the content should be considered individual advice. If you require personalized advice, please consult an appropriate professional. Information deemed reliable, but not guaranteed.